My wife and I have lived here in Eagle, Idaho for the last 2 years now, and just like with any place, there are some things that we absolutely love, but there are also some things that we wouldn't mind see changing just a little bit. This time last year, I did one of these videos exactly like this, talking about our 1-year review of Eagle, so I figured it was time to kind of give that a refresh. I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that we do love, things that we don't, but also look back on last year's and see, did anything change when we moved to Eagle? What did we expect, and are there any regrets? With the hopes that this gives you a total non-BS transparent look into what somebody living in this area is actually experiencing, not the typical, hey, our area is perfect, come on, move here. This is meant to give you the real kind of on the ground look in. And to get started so that you know exactly where you're coming from, I wanted to share a little bit about who we are and kind of how we made it to living here in Eagle. So I originally relocated up here from Colorado back in 2012. I came up here for school. She is actually originally from here. They dabbled in a couple of other states throughout her childhood, but she is a Boise local. And like I said, I came up here for school, so that's actually where we met. We are both proud Boise State graduates. After we graduated, I actually went out to Michigan. I spent a couple years out there going to grad school. The plan, to be completely honest, was never to end up here for the long term. I always thought we'd end up in Colorado, somewhere that our career would take us. But at the end of the day, and I say this to people all the time, this place kind of sucks you in. And once I started comparing this to all the other places, it was a really good place to live. And as much as I think I had a say in the matter, my wife's entire family is here, so I don't think we were really ever going somewhere. But that's kind of what drew me back. In 2018, when I came back, we actually bought our first home. And it was your classic kind of starter level home, 3-bed, 2-bath, split level. And I cannot overstate how much this set the stage for us. Buying in 2018, that entry level home, we bought it for around $250,000 here in Meridian. And then eventually we did move into something just a little bit bigger to give us some more space. And we kept that one as a rental, but we actually sold that one just a couple years ago. And that's what gave us the money to have the down payment to move into the home that we're currently in here in Eagle. I don't want to get off onto a complete tangent because that's not the purpose of this video, but this sort of ladder, starting with that entry level and kind of making your way up one home at a time, that is how the game is played. That's how you end up in that kind of more forever home, somewhere that you feel comfortable being for the next decade. But really the moral here is I know that you all know how much our area has grown and how housing prices have just completely skyrocketed. We're about double probably what everything was worth in 2016, 2017, that 2018 timeframe. So we really got to ride that wave, and we had that kind of help us in the back end. While we were living in that home, we actually got married back in 2019. So we started to kind of shift our thinking towards where is that next stage of our life going? Where do we want to put down those roots? And when we kind of looked at where our lives were at, we have two fabulous dogs, Dixie and Breck. We got a Labradoodle and an Aussie Doodle. They are a big part of our world. So we wanted somewhere that they could really thrive. Both of us are a little bit more of that homebody. So we wanted a home, we wanted a neighborhood that we really felt comfortable in. We absolutely love getting outdoors and kind of experiencing the nature and seeing everything that Boise has to offer, but we also really revolve a lot of our kind of leaving the house and doing things around food and drink, but we like more of those local places. We're not as much into the Chili's, Applebee's, as great as they can be. That's not where we want to go. We want to try something new. So even though our first home was in Meridian and our second one was actually in Meridian as well, everything there really set the stage for us to choose Eagle when it was that time. And that's where I want to focus. I want to talk a little bit about why we actually ended up in Eagle. Why did we choose Eagle over Meridian, over Boise, over somewhere in Canyon County? What led us to this exact place? And the first big reason is when I say that we have our dogs, we love the outdoors. That is a huge part of our life and how we like to spend a lot of our time. And one of the big pros with living here in Eagle is just the location. You're on that northern edge of the valley, so the foothills, getting out of town, everything is just a little bit closer. We have the river running straight through the downtown. So getting the dogs out for a nice long walk on the greenbelt, going down on the river, that is much, much easier to do when it's a 5-10 minute drive versus being near the highway in Meridian. It's another 20 minutes to get down there. Do we really want to do that to take the dogs on a walk, or are we just going to take them somewhere closer? But we also spend a lot of time escaping town up north. So we have a family cabin up towards Warm Lake. That is just outside of Cascade, but we also got a new family cabin last year up in Donnelly. So we spend a lot of time in those two places. And when you're closer to this northern edge of town, it takes us almost half an hour less than it did at our first home in Meridian, and about 45 minutes left from our second one, to where we can get up and escape to the cabins under 2 hours compared to 2.5 hours, which doesn't sound like a huge difference, but I am somebody who hates the driving part of going places. So on a weekend trip where we're only gonna be there for a couple of nights, under 2 hours to get up to the cabin and 2 hours back, that's very different than even 2.5 hours. I want it to be worth our time, and this has allowed us to really take advantage of those a little bit more. And then while we're on the nature outdoors component, just the geography of Eagle was really, really appealing to me. Again, I come from Colorado where there's mountains, there's a ton of different topographical changes. Here in our valley, it can be pretty flat, but on the northern edge or the eastern edge of Boise, we get the foothills. You can see the mountains in the background a little bit. So our drives here in Eagle are very, very different than they are in Meridian, in South Meridian, CUNA, for example. And then coming back to the dogs and us being a little bit more of those homebodies, our neighborhood and our home were extremely important in our search. So we really are drawn to those kind of master planned communities. And there are plenty of those options in both Meridian and Eagle, but the one that we found in Eagle, we just absolutely loved. It's a little bit more established than some of the ones in Meridian that we were looking at. So it has a little bit more of that established feel, but for us, we were one of the last homes to be in here. So they stopped construction pretty quickly after we moved in, which was huge. We didn't want to be in a construction site. One of the other things that really drew us here is, like I said, we love our food and drink. We like to go out, try new places, and we really like those local or more one-off places over the chains, and Eagle thrives in this component. You will not find a ton of chain restaurants in here. We do have the Starbucks, we have a McDonald's, Wendy's, but you're not going to find everything. That is what Eagle Road in Meridian is for. So we have a lot more of those really cool places to go out and try. Some of our absolute favorites are Crave Kitchen and Bar has been a go-to for us. Pig Latin we just tried for the first time. Everything we ordered there was fantastic. Coa Del Mar, same owners as Barbacoa in Boise, Coa Del Hima in downtown Boise. Absolutely fantastic if you're looking for that steak, you want to have kind of that patio overlooking the lake. I'm big into seafood, my wife is not, so it's a nice place to go and kind of get best of both worlds. And then you've got Kachi, you've got Beckheads. I could continue on and on, but Eagle really drove us to that because it has a lot of options, but it isn't just the widespread things you're going to find everywhere. But keep a note on that because there are some things with the food and drink scene that we could use a little bit more of, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later in the video. Outside of those 4 things that really led us to where we wanted to be, there were a few more that really solidified the choice to be here in Eagle. First one is that my wife's family, her parents in particular, and now actually a couple more, they're all in North Meridian, kind of in that Spurwing, Fairborn area. So when we first started this search about 2.5, 3 years ago, I was immediately drawn to South Meridian. You can be ahead of the development. I absolutely love that. You're going to get a little bit of a discount because you are ahead of those services, the restaurants, grocery stores, etc. But at the end of the day, being here on the northern side of Meridian or into Eagle or that very northeastern portion of Nampa, that was huge for us. My wife would much rather be 10 to 15 minutes away from the family versus when I'm talking about, and I say it a lot on the channel, getting from South Meridian all the way to Eagle, kind of going north and south, that can take quite a bit of time. It can be 30 to 40 minutes depending on the time of day. And that just isn't what we really wanted to do when we think about how much time we spend with the other people in our life. And Eagle really stood out as we started to think about that next phase of our life. We're starting to get into the family planning stage of our relationship and just our future. So when we were looking at Eagle, one of the things that has always stood out is people with families absolutely love it out here. The schools are extremely well rated. Everybody has good things to say. You have the access to the outdoors. You got Eagle Island State Park down there. So there's a ton of fun activities to keep the kids busy. Eagle is known to be one of the safest places in our entire valley, which is always a huge win when you're thinking about kids. And then this was another reason that led us to that master plan community. There's a ton of different paths where we're taking the dogs for now, but kids eventually out on walks. It's not the same little loop around the neighborhood, just switching direction. There are plenty of different options. 2 community pools. There should be plenty of kids in the neighborhood so that they can really build a life of their own. And then the final component that really drew us to Eagle in particular was we were actually under contract back in 2022 on a new build in that northeastern Nampa side of things. If you remember going back in the end of 2022, kind of start of 2023, everything with the housing market was changing. We were starting to see that nice little correction, bringing things back down to earth a little bit. So we were under contract for a new build, but our home was now it was not worth what we were kind of building it for. And our builder just wasn't really ready to play the game of adjusting so that it would make sense for us. So as we were looking at that, all of a sudden it was thinking about a bad investment. And then once we started looking at the other things out there, we were drawn to this neighborhood in Eagle where we could get a better community, we could get a better quality build, better home build, or just design and such that fit us a little bit more. and it was at a better price. So we went from a situation that might have been sticky, we would have been fine, but we probably wouldn't have seen much of an equity growth for a few years, getting into a community where it was kind of towards the bottom of what this community is going to be worth. So we turned a bad quote unquote investment into an actual really good one. So that timing and all of that also really shoved us to, hey, let's make this decision. We're going to take a little bit of a hit on that deposit, everything for that new build, but at the end of the day, it was worth it for the long term. Now, with all of that being said and what drew us here, I want to be completely honest, not everything is perfect. There are some things with Eagle that absolutely drive me crazy, and I'm hoping kind of get addressed over the next coming years, but there's also some things that might not be addressed, and it's just kind of the nature of the beast of living over here. The first and probably my number one annoyance with living in Eagle is, like I mentioned, getting north and south in our valley in particular is already hard, but getting from Eagle even into Meridian can drive you crazy. We really have, if you look at a map, we have that grid set up in Meridian, and we have that a little bit out in northern Eagle, but on a very, very small scale. But our main road going through Eagle is going to be State Street or Highway 44. That is how you're going to get into downtown for the most part. And that road, even though it is one of the more main thoroughfares, it moves pretty quickly. We can get from our home down to Boise State for a basketball, football game in just about half an hour, which is not that bad. But where the issues with traffic and flow and the amount of people in that commute really come into play is getting from Eagle and State Street and getting across the river section into Chinden in North Meridian. So looking back at the map, you're going to see that from Eagle to Meridian, as of right now, there are basically two ways to get from one city to another, and there is a huge amount of people that are making that trip every single day. On the western edge and close to where we're living, there's Linder Road. So this is a very small one lane each way kind of road. It gets backed up immensely during rush hour. And if you get into an accident, somebody is turning left and they can't quite get out of the way, whatever it is, it can get backed up very, very quickly. And then the only other option is towards the eastern end of Eagle, but kind of going right into downtown Eagle, is Eagle Road. Eagle Road, if you're familiar with our area at all, it is the busiest road we have up here. Eagle and Fairview by the Village is the busiest intersection we have in the state. So even though for the most part, Eagle Road does move pretty quickly, there is a ton of traffic basically all times throughout the day, but especially in those rush hour periods. And then there are a lot of lights there. Basically every single road, when you're looking at that Meridian grid system, has a light. So depending on your luck with hitting those lights perfectly, it can really be a stop and go kind of experience. And all of this just adds up to, if we need to get to the highway for some reason or just into Meridian, we need to go to the village, it takes about the same amount of time to get there as it does to get into downtown Boise, which just wasn't what we expected. And it's just something that annoys the crap out of me. As being somebody who's in real estate, I go all over the valley. So that is my least favorite thing to do. And unfortunately, with the river and all of the homes in there, I don't see this changing big time anytime soon. There just aren't plots of land that they can continue roads in. Do I hope that they kind of extend Linder Road a little bit? Of course. And there are two projects kind of on the edge of Eagle on both sides that should help with some of this traffic flow. So on the western edge, kind of where Eagle and Star meet, you're gonna have Highway 16. And this highway is currently under a massive expansion. So right now it connects State Street and Chinden and allows you to kind of get over there quickly. But then once you get to Chinden, it doesn't connect all the way to the highway. So it's just another one of those neighborhood roads. Over the next few years, they're actually connecting it through a series of overpasses, expansions, etc., with Highway 84. So this is going to be huge for our valley. It's really going to help people get places that they need to a little bit quicker and hopefully alleviate some of that stress on the roads like Linder, Meridian, Eagle. But that's still a few years away. And if I've learned anything about development, especially the infrastructure, something that they say is going to take a few years could be just a little bit longer than that, but that should help. And then on the eastern edge, when we're looking at Highway 55, there have been rumors, the city council, the mayor has kind of floated the idea that continuing that all the way over to Chinden would be absolutely massive. But there's a few moving parts with that they're not sure when, if that would happen. But I really think that having at least one other place to kind of allow some of that stress on the roads to get from Eagle into Meridian would be absolutely huge. But leaving the traffic tangent and getting a little bit more focused on those things that I wish Eagle would do just a little bit better is right now our downtown is getting revitalized a little bit, but it's also growing because our city is growing. So there's been downtown construction kind of right in the heart of downtown Eagle for about the last year and a half. It makes getting down there such a pain. You're always taking these wide scenic routes into downtown Eagle instead of just the very easy way. But it is in the hope that it's creating a nice little city center. It's going to add some more shops. It's going to add a couple of condos and such up top. It will be cool once it's done. I just would like it to speed up a little bit. The other thing that Eagle just doesn't really have is any sort of nightlife or places to go if you're just meeting somebody for a drink. It's much, much harder to find that here in Eagle versus Meridian and Boise. There are a couple options on the horizon that should help this a little bit. Pig Latin, like I mentioned earlier, just opened about a month ago. They have a really nice bar. They got a nice patio. This will be a place that you can go out for happy hour and hopefully kind of scratch that itch a little bit. But I think even this small annoyance kind of highlights why we would end up in Eagle and what Eagle can be perfect for. Every once in a while, we love getting out with friends. We want to have a place to go, get drinks, and kind of catch up with people, but we aren't the nightlife crowd. So being close to Boise, as much as it would be fun, we just would never use it. So having at least one or two places to go when the time comes would be absolutely awesome. But we aren't the type of people who need that every single week. So for the last couple of years, if we need to go into Boise, if we need to go into Meridian, we can always make that trip. And to stay on that food, drink scene and how it's growing here in the area and that nightlife, this is something that I talked about a lot in the last video, but we are seeing that grow here in Eagle, even over the last 12 months. We have had some really good additions over the last year of Coa Del Mar. We've had Pig Latin. We have Form and Function, a new really popular coffee shop, setting up a location in Eastern Eagle. We have really fell in love with a few of the coffee shops that are already here. You're gonna have Cavista in downtown Eagle. You're gonna have Jovino's, which is an absolute go-to for me. You're gonna have Eagle Coffee and Bakery. All of these have been staples and they're kind of our little rotation whenever we're going out on a weekend or when somebody visits. It's where I take them to kind of do that introductory meeting. We do still have a ton of really good local kind of one-off options. They are pretty top heavy. So you're gonna see that you're gonna fall in love with a few and the others will be good, but you kind of always have your rotation. Everything that I mentioned earlier, Crave, Baquettes, Kachi, Coins, all of them are really good options. But there are two areas of town that I would love to see just a couple of things that are a little bit quicker. So where I'm at on the western edge of Eagle, there is not a lot. We just had about last year a new breakfast place come in, Janet's Cafe. They have been fantastic. But outside of that and a little Jackson's gas station kind of convenience store, there is nothing here. Which at the end of the day, it's a little 10-minute drive to get what we need. But on those nights where we just want something sweet, we want something super quick, there's really not much to be found here. And then as I said, we love to escape up north. So being where we're at, we're able to shoot up some of the side streets and hit Beacon Light, which is kind of one of our more northernmost roads in this kind of main part of Eagle. We can take that all the way to Highway 55 and cut another 10 minutes off that commute. But if we're ever just a little bit late getting out of town, so we're trying to escape and we want to be up there in there a couple hours and we haven't eaten, we are forced to kind of take a different route into downtown Eagle to have any sort of option of picking food up on the way. So I know that on Highway 55, north of Beacon Light, kind of towards Dry Creek and Avamore, there are plans to make a ton of commercial and kind of build this out. But I would love to see just one fast food, something quick place up there. That way, as you're escaping out of town, you can kind of still take advantage of one of those great pros with that commute. But you might be thinking it, and hopefully you're hearing it in my voice. Those are two pretty minor things. That's just kind of what I would love to make our life just a little bit more easier. We do have a newer development that's coming to downtown Eagle that's going to bring a couple more restaurants. It's going to bring a Chick-fil-A. That's kind of their staple place. But for more information, watch this video up top. I broke into a few really cool things that are coming into Eagle. But that is one thing that we've seen with Eagle is that it is growing and they aren't as resistant to growth as some of the other smaller towns, but it is no longer that absolute small town. Right now, it's this nice middle ground where you're getting a little bit of both. And I do think they're doing a good job with building out sustainably and trying to do it smart while still giving those growth aspects that everybody does need. Now, one of the main talking points when we're talking about Eagle is the cost of living and the housing. When you're looking at median prices around the valley, Eagle is going to be the highest by quite a margin. As of filming this, the median home price in Eagle is just around $850,000, $875,000, which you compare that to Boise as the next kind of expensive one, they're still down around that $500,000 mark. Now, one very big thing to mention here is Eagle has some very high-end communities. So right on that southern edge of Eagle before you get into Meridian, there's the Boise River. There are some fantastic communities there, but those are going to be up into that $2, $3, $4 million range, which is obviously going to bring our average and median up. And then we have a similar thing on the northern side of Eagle, where you're gonna have these massive luxury homes, but they're gonna be on an acre, 2 acres, more of that estate lot feel. And those are also gonna run pretty high. So we have a very high-end luxury market in Eagle, but this does mean that housing just on a grand scale is gonna be more expensive here in Eagle. The zip code in the city has a certain appeal to it. People want to be in Eagle for all the reasons that I've already mentioned. So an entry-level home, if you're looking in Eagle, you're probably gonna wanna be closer to that 600, 700,000 mark to give yourself some options. But the majority of options here are gonna be in that 800 to around $1 million range. So just know this when you're thinking about your budget and kind of what you're looking for, your dollar is not going to stretch as far in Eagle compared to a lot of different places in our valley. Outside of housing, the cost of living here is very similar to Boise, Meridian, and Star. When we moved from those homes in Meridian, we really didn't see a huge difference. The only thing that we really noticed is in Meridian, they bill their water, sewer, and trash together, or at least they did when we were there. And then it was more of just like a flat fee, and it was much cheaper than if you were to get those billed out separately. And then when we moved to Eagle, our water, sewer, and trash are all billed separately, and we probably pay about double for those every single month compared to what we were paying in Meridian. Make sure to do some of your own research, but I think right now for those three in Meridian, depending on your housing size, I'm sure there's some scaffolding, you're gonna be looking at around 50 to 60, 70 bucks. Whereas on a monthly average here in Eagle, once we account for all of them, we're looking at a little bit closer to that 100 bucks a month. Another noticeable change here in Eagle, and part of this has to do with that higher median price and people expect it, and the kind of widespread new master plan community feel in Eagle, is our HOA and our HOA dues here are noticeably higher than some other parts of the valley. So if you're in a community out in Eagle that has a pool, it has any sort of amenities on top of just kind of a big green area, you should expect to be a little bit closer to that 750,000. It is not rare at all if you got a couple of pools to be in that $2,000 a year range. So shopping in Eagle is a little bit different than, hey, I don't want to pay anything for an HOA. It's, I'm looking in this area, am I getting something of value in exchange for that HOA? You just got to think about it a little bit differently. But on the flip side, one of the things in Eagle cost of living wise that was actually noticeably different is we have the lowest property taxes in the entire valley. As of filming this, I believe we're getting taxed at around 0.44 of your overall assessed value, which is a little bit lower than Meridian. I think about they're at around 0.54. And then Boise's gonna be a little bit higher at 0.9. And then as you get out into Canyon County, things do get just a little bit more. So you're kind of getting a little bit of a trade-off of your housing is gonna be more expensive, but the amount that you're taxed on that is gonna be a little bit less. Now, one of the top questions that I got last year, and I get from clients basically every time they're looking at Eagle and they learn that's where I live, is kind of, okay, what are your thoughts on kind of what's coming? Would you still purchase here today? Are there any regrets? Kind of what would you do if you were going back in time knowing what you know now? Depending on where you're at in life, this is a very different decision. So one, right now, we are very future focused. We are hoping to have our first kid within the next year. We know at least one more, hopefully, will come after that. So kids and kind of getting ourselves set up for that is absolutely huge for all the reasons that I talked about earlier. And I do believe that over the next decade or so, that long-term vision of both our lives and where I see Eagle and the entire valley going, this is a place that I think is set up for massive success. And from a housing investment side, even though it is our primary residence, for all the reasons that I talked about why we switched that build when we did, Eagle is a place that even when we were seeing a solid correction, home prices only came down so much. It has consistently been one of the most appealing places in our entire valley, which is already a very appealing place for people to move to. So the demand is always there when things get down to a little bit of a price point. And this is especially true when we're thinking about relocation. People moving from other states and other cities, they absolutely flock to Eagle, which again, just keeps that demand for housing up at a nice level. And then when we're thinking a decade out, for me, it's important to know, will my home continue to grow in value, or is there gonna be a cap? When you're a city like us that's growing so fast, at some point, housing prices are just gonna have to slow down because we are not a massive city in California yet. A little 3-bed, 2-bath starter home in Boise that has nothing special, it's not gonna be worth $1 million anytime soon. We still have too much room to grow. So it was important to me that if I'm paying a premium to be an Eagle and all of the other things that I've talked about, I also want to know that there is an upper end to where my house can continue to grow. And I see that in Eagle much more than a lot of the places around town. And at the end of the day, without getting on to some other political or whatever tangent, Idaho as a state, it definitely has some issues. And the same can be said for all of our cities here in the valley. When it comes to that growth, the infrastructure, there are a lot of things that need to be done. But even with those, I cannot lie to you and say this is not a great place to live. So I can't promise that this will be our absolute forever home, but we can do a lot worse when we're thinking about the next 5 to 10 years. And then thinking about those regrets or would we continue to move here, I think the answer is yes for a lot of the reasons that we talked about, because we are in that kind of future focused part of our life. But there are a few things that I would consider. So one, I am extremely excited about the new community popping up in the foothills just north of Eagle, Valnova. Growing up where I did in Colorado, big master plan communities kind of throughout the foothills, those were extremely popular. It's what I was familiar with, and it's something that we just haven't had here. So as that gets built out with the level of builders and the level of amenities that they're planning, I just think that's going to be an absolutely awesome project. So even though we've already been here for 2 years, my mini regret would be, okay, I wish we might have known about that coming and we could have planned there, but that could be a place that we move in the future. Depending on the day, I do have a little bit of regret sometime that it would have been great to move to a different part of town and not pay that Eagle premium. Could have had my dollar just stretch a little bit further, had a little lower mortgage. Of course, that crosses my mind. But we thought long and hard about it, so I'd encourage you to do the same, that we thought that it was worth it in our eyes. With my job and business in real estate, having to go all over the valley consistently, there are times where that commute drives me absolutely crazy. Our last home in Meridian was right off the highway, so I could get anywhere within 30 minutes. There are certain parts of town now, southeast Boise, kind of out by Lake Lowell, Kuna, that it can take me closer to an hour to get to. So it does kind of drive me crazy. But again, our home and our neighborhood and such was really our main draw. I can make the commute work. And lastly, I do love Boise. I love the river. I love the bars, the cafes, the wineries, the restaurants, the energy of the city. So there are times when I talk about not paying that Eagle premium that I wish we might have looked somewhere there so that we'd have a little bit quicker access to those things that we do like to do, places to take our friends, etc. But something that I didn't mention is we are very partial to new homes. We like to know that this was our home and we're the first people living there. And that's a lot harder to find in Boise than it is in Eagle. But overall, that's kind of been our experience over the last 2 years. We love living here. There are some things that we'd like to see improved and just small changes that I do think will come. But the main goal with this entire video was to kind of just give you a little bit more of that honest, transparent look into what it is actually like to live here for some people that have actually gone through the experience. So as much as I saved it till the end, if you do have any questions or you want to hear more about our experience, ask some of those specific questions and figure out if it's right for you and your family, I am a licensed agent up here in the area, so I'd absolutely love to help. I help people just like you make that move up to our area every single day. And I know that it's a massive decision, so we just want to take it one step at a time. And one of those big steps is make sure that you hit subscribe to this video. That way you are the first to know everything you need to know about living up here in the area. But until then, thank you for watching. Watch one of these videos that's popping up, and I'll see you all on the next one.